On January 13, 1969, he was born at the Fulham Palace Cafe. That makes him 56 years old now. Robert Fripp is among the greatest musicians of the 20th century. He didn't, however, try to please everyone, wear dark sunglasses, have wild hair, or get into any romantic problems. He was not interested in being the center of attention. He rejected love and fame, and it was precisely this quality that made him a legend. King Crimson, a psychedelic rock band whose albums were each like a whole new world of sounds, is centered around Fripp. They broke all the rules and were ahead of their time. Then they were gone, never to be seen again. At the same time that bands like Pink Floyd and Genesis rose to fame, King Crimson remained unknown because they were constantly evolving, extremely wild, and not widely recognized. How, then, did a quiet, reclusive man who didn't try to market himself or attract like-minded individuals end up becoming recognized as the musical genius behind an entire genre? Why was Fripp viewed as a sort of musical genius by well-known artists like Peter Gabriel, Brian Eno, and David Bowie? Popularity was not what Robert Fripp desired. He was forced to listen for noises that no one else had. Youth. On May 16, 1946, Robert Fripp was born in the peaceful English town of Wimborne Minster. Arthur Fripp, his father, was a busy but upright grocery store owner who firmly believed in working-class values. His mother, Edith, was stern and pragmatic. No one, not even her own child, ever seemed weak to her. The family had no philosophy books, no music room, and no artists. Work, duty, and silence were all that existed. Early on, Fripp demonstrated that he didn't quite blend in with his surroundings. At the age of 4, he began learning to read, and at 6, he began playing chess. He would frequently spend hours sitting quietly thinking about things that most children don't consider, such as the passing of time and the necessity of solitude. Robert didn't fit in, didn't talk to many people, and didn't have many friends at school. However, he also didn't cause any problems. He was too quiet to reprimand and too intelligent to teach, according to his teachers. When he was 11 years old, he discovered his sister's inexpensive, long-forgotten guitar hidden in a corner. It was as if he had discovered a way to turn his thoughts into music. He was still unsure of what it was. It was simply a way for Fripp to live without needing to express himself verbally. When Fripp was a teenager, he didn't play sports or have any close friends. Instead, he read philosophers of being and will, including Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, and Gurdjieff, and played the guitar in his own unique style for hours every day. In order to discover how sound could symbolize nebulous concepts like space or the self, he played the guitar in an unusual way, not to brag. Being on stage did not appeal to Fripp. He was not going to be a star. When he was 15, he was adamant about becoming an accountant, which his family believed was a wise decision. He later stated in an interview, "I didn't want to stand in front of a crowd, but I wanted to find how a single note could reach where words could not." One day he gave up. He couldn't survive without being able to comprehend sound, not because he was bored. His parents, who had always believed that artists were lazy, were taken aback by his decision. During this period, Fripp began to establish a very rigorous personal schedule, establishing specific times for studying, working out, meditating, and keeping an extensive journal. He didn't smoke, drink, or attend parties. He got up early every morning and practiced by himself. He continued to do this well into his late 70s. "I don't see myself as a guitar player. I'm someone searching for sound. And the guitar is just the tool." Robert Fripp's early years and adolescence were devoid of overt tragedy, according to one of his masterclasses. However, there was a silent struggle between the need to explore one's inner world and the pressures of society to fit in, a mind that didn't function properly, a self that was constantly asking questions, and a quiet loneliness. In a society where one's value was based on how loudly one spoke, Fripp eschewed loudness in favor of quiet and created music that stood out from the crowd. Early in the workday, Robert Fripp was a talented musician who chose not to do what most people do when they reach the age of 20. He didn't perform in bars or join cover bands in order to earn money. Rather, he read philosophy, practiced his own way, and studied the structure of music as he developed his abilities. He was a peculiar figure in the 1960s London music scene, too solemn, too reserved, and unconcerned with what people thought. Together with brothers Michael and Peter Giles, Fripp became a member of the odd band Giles, and Fripp in 1967. The group combined jazz, classical, and pop music. Despite the group's poor box office performance, Fripp began to experiment with the concept of music as a living structure, not just something to be heard, but also something to comprehend and experience on a mental level. Building on that, he and a few others founded King Crimson in 1968. Not as a typical band, but rather as a collective artistic statement. Fripp was in charge of all things artistic, including the band's performance style, the arrangements and sounds, and even the album covers, even though he didn't sing or speak much in public. Regardless of the prevailing trends, he believed that the band was constantly evolving and that the music was always improving. When, In the Court of the Crimson King, their debut album, was released in October 1969, it immediately became an enormous hit. From strange mellotron parts to wild, growling guitar lines, ritualistic melodies, and lyrics full of end-of-the-world visions, this album had it all in terms of rock music. It was described by Rolling Stone as a explosion of perception that blew your mind. Fripp wasn't aiming for that kind of success, but Pete Townsend of The Who declared, "It's the first true masterpiece of progressive rock." A few months later, the group started to have issues. Ian MacDonald and Greg Lake departed simultaneously. Fripp was very particular and refused to compromise, which made it difficult for others to work with him. But he was not afraid. Fripp believed that there were no actual members of King Crimson. The song was only supposed to last. "I didn't start a band to continue it." Fripp once remarked, "I started a band to find out what no one had heard before." Over the next 5 years, he continued to change up the band members and released records like Lark's Tongues in Aspic, Starless and Bible Black and Red, all of which were very different, extreme, and ahead of their time. Fripp wasn't looking for security, he was looking for something bigger. A holy and chaotic kind of music that could change people's minds. And this was just the beginning. Success in your job. Robert Fripp took a quiet detour in the early 1970s, when progressive rock acts were at the top of their game. For him, it didn't matter how many records were sold or how many people attended the show, it was about how deeply music could impact people's thoughts. Fripp abruptly announced that the band was disbanding after releasing 3 consecutive albums in 1973 and 1974, Bible Black, Red, Starless, and Lark's Tongues in Aspic. He attributed this to his belief that music was turning into a commodity rather than an experience, saying, "We were no longer creating rituals." He told me, "We were selling tickets." Reviewers and fans were upset about the decision, but Fripp went into hiding and studied with J. Gurdjieff's ideas were taught by a British sage named G. Bennett. Fripp took meditation classes, worked by hand, and tried to live like a monk, believing that this would purify the artist's mind so that he could return to making music without any ego getting in the way. His work can be heard on David Bowie's Heroes record from 1977, where he collaborated with Brian Eno on the albums No Pussyfooting and later Evening Star, which were the first ambient albums to use tape loop methods, which were known as Frippatronics. Fripp didn't change King Crimson either. Instead, he jumped right into a series of projects that broke all the rules. The main track's uncanny quality came from Fripp's eerie, distorted, lingering guitar playing that seemed to come from another world. Discipline, the album that combined post-punk minimalism and meditative thought, was a turning point. While many old bands got stuck using the same old ideas, Fripp always stayed one step ahead and never did the same thing twice. Fripp was on Peter Gabriel's first solo record and worked with Daryl Hall, Blondie, and Talking Heads. He also taught the idea of music as a spiritual path in his own workshops. In 1981, he brought King Crimson back to life, but with a completely new lineup, sound, and attitude. At each step, he dismantled what he had created, not because he thought it was foolish but rather because he didn't want to remain in one spot. "I want the music to still be happening, not remembered," he said. King Crimson changed nearly every member of the band on more than 50 albums. Fripp never tried to keep the band stable because he believed that when things were stable, they got stuck. Fripp was not just a musician who could change things up. His behavior made it very difficult to work with him. Fripp considered music as a holy ritual, and anyone who didn't take it very seriously was thought to be on a different level of awareness. The legendary drummer Bill Bruford once remarked, "Fripp is a creative genius, but he demands total control, from every drum beat to how you stand on stage." Fripp quit the music industry in 2013 because he didn't think artists and the system would respect each other anymore, and he didn't invite Adrian Belew back, which infuriated fans. Fripp didn't give a reason, he simply said, "Emotion is not the measure of artistic decisions." However, Fripp had a difficult time for a long time. For years, he claimed that record labels such as EG Records were violating his copyrights by re-releasing his songs without his consent. He sued, wrote open letters, and spoke out against the music industry, calling it unethical and designed to exploit people. In the mid-1990s, he founded his own record label, Discipline Global Mobile, DGM, which was founded on the principles of transparency, equitable profit sharing, and respect for artistic rights. DGM became a model for many other independent acts to follow. Fripp's public persona caused him even more trouble when, during the COVID-19 pandemic, he appeared unexpectedly in a YouTube series called Sunday Lunch, in which he played guitar while his wife, singer Toya Wilcox, danced, wore outrageous outfits, and sang rock hits. Many people were shocked to ask, was this really Robert Fripp? Because Robert Fripp knew better than anyone else that the price you pay for being free is being misunderstood your entire life, the public was divided. Some said he was ruining the image of the legend. Perhaps for the first time, other people noticed that Fripp was having a great time. Fripp's response was succinct: "Artists who can't laugh at themselves are praising themselves instead of the music." In his personal life, Robert Fripp was not a rock star in every sense of the word. He had no parties, no fan bases, and no television in his living room. He woke up at 6 a.m. every day, like a modern-day recluse, and spent his time alone playing the guitar, reading philosophy, and jotting down all of his thoughts in shabby leather-bound notebooks. In 1986, Fripp married Toya Wilcox, a British rock star from the 1980s, but no one saw that they would marry. He was serious, introspective, and disciplined. She was fiery, free-spirited, and not afraid to sing, "I Want to Be Free," in the middle of a busy street while wearing bright red lipstick. They lived together in a quiet, old house in Worcestershire, full of books, music, and sunlight. There should be no children, incidents, or shows. They had kept their life a secret for over 30 years. There would be no galas for the music industry or star-studded circus rides. However, they all shared a crucial trait. They fully respected each other's rights. Fripp once remarked, "Toya doesn't need me to fully understand her. She needs me to accept her for who she is, and I need to accept her for who she is." While he worked alone, she worked on odd music projects, theater, TV, books, and paintings. In the traditional sense, they didn't do everything together, but they were always there for each other. By 2020, when COVID-19 had spread and the UK was under lockdown, Toya had an odd idea: make YouTube videos of them singing rock songs together in their kitchen. At first, Fripp refused, but he eventually agreed, not for the music, but for her. Thus began the Sunday Lunch video series, in which Fripp played Metallica riffs on his guitar while his wife danced wildly, dressed absurdly, and yelled cheeky lyrics. The videos were widely shared, and people watched, laughed, and scratched their heads, wondering if this was indeed the cold, distant Fripp from King Crimson. Robert Fripp didn't have a pretty love story in his personal life. Instead, he gave the person he loved the freedom to live her life in her own way, which contrasted with being still and moving, meditating and rebelling, and philosophical quiet and laughter coming from the kitchen. Perhaps this was the only way his songs could finally rest in peace. History and power. Though he didn't intend to become famous, he became the icon of declining. In the music industry, charts and the number of fans are frequently used to gauge success. Fripp, on the other hand, left behind radical creative freedom and a musical theory that no one else has been able to imitate. Fripp's first and most significant influence was prog rock. King Crimson was more than just the first band in their genre. It was like a laboratory where rock, jazz, classical, ambient, noise, and even meditation were constantly colliding, experimenting, and changing. Each record was its own world that never returned. Without King Crimson, Tool, Dream Theater, Porcupine Tree, and even Radiohead might not exist. According to Steven Wilson, the lead singer of Porcupine Tree, King Crimson is the unfinished map of progressive rock, and Fripp is the one who drew every line with his own hands. However, Fripp's influence extended beyond music. He left behind a way of thinking that says an artist should look for truth in every song rather than trying to please the market. Through his record label, Discipline Global Mobile, DGM, he fought for artists' rights, transparency regarding earnings, and refraining from using artistic intelligence for financial gain. He frequently stated in his writings and speeches that creating music is a moral act and that if it isn't honest, it won't be heard. He also established a guitar craft school in 1985 that taught more than just technique. Students learned how to stand, breathe, be silent, and listen to sound as if it were a living thing on this spiritual journey. Many well-known musicians attended, and they eventually dubbed it a sound meditation school. Fripp's recordings with Brian Eno, including No Pussyfooting and Evening Star, helped popularize ambient music, and his Frippatronic style, which used tape loops to create sounds, would later be utilized by Aphex Twin and 9 Inch Nails, among others. We don't need fancy ads or shouting to get noticed. And maybe Robert Fripp became himself because he never tried to be anyone else. He is a unique and unbeatable figure in the history of modern music. Right now. In 2025, Robert Fripp will be 79 years old. He still wakes up at 6 a.m. Which is different from the picture of an old artist living in quiet nostalgia. Fripp wrote, "A single honest note can outlast a fake career that spans 40 years. Still, Fripp might not have left behind the most significant recordings. It's still where he and his wife, Toya Wilcox, live. The stone walls are covered in moss, and the only sound you can hear in the morning is the soft hum of guitar strings. He meditates, plays the guitar, and writes down his thoughts every day in a leather-bound notebook that he keeps next to his bed. Fripp doesn't think of age as an end, it's just one more step on the artist's path. There are no parties for them, and they work every day as if they were still young." In 2012, Fripp was believed to have quit the music industry after declaring he was leaving. But he returned stronger than ever. In 2013, a new band was added to King Crimson, and instead of following the trends, he went against them, performing shows like Sacred Rituals and releasing albums like Radical Action to unseat the hold of Monkey Mind, Meltdown, and Live in Mexico City. Since 2020, Fripp has gained popularity as a YouTuber in a way that no one had anticipated. In the Sunday Lunch video series, he wears a sharp suit, plays heavy metal hits like Enter Sandman and Chop Suey, while Toya dances, dresses up in bizarre costumes, yells lyrics, and occasionally cracks eggs on his head. The videos were viewed by millions of people, making Fripp a strange sort of internet hero that was half real and half fake. Critics were lost, and longtime fans disagreed, but Fripp remained cool. "I don't perform to protect an image," he said. "I live, and living can look strange to people who are already dead inside." He and Toya continued their Sunday Lunch Rock Party tour across the UK in 2024, performing in small theaters. Fripp continued to release new ambient recordings and essays on musical philosophy through DGM Live, a website he runs himself and is in charge of all the material and copyright. At nearly 80 years old, Robert Fripp has nothing left to show. He simply went to a different world where the guitar still plays every morning, unaffected by time, fashion, or business. Robert Fripp, the man who spent his entire life avoiding people, is now the most likable celebrity social media has ever seen. He never shouted to be heard, but his name is still among the most recognizable in music, not because of record sales or other commercial successes, but because he is still living proof that you can refuse everything the industry asks of you and still be proud. Fripp never tried to become famous, but instead tried to be true to every sound he played, every thought he wrote down, and every moment he lived. Because he was honest, he left an indelible mark on the minds of a whole group of artists, not on the charts. Now that he is nearly 80 years old, he doesn't make big announcements or costly farewell trips. He only plays guitar every morning with his Wonderfully. Robert Fripp believes that greatness is not defined by fame, but rather by the space between two notes, a place where only courageous people can wait to hear it. Have you ever heard King Crimson, kid? How does it make you feel to see someone like Fripp, who is nearly 80 years old, still singing Metallica in the kitchen with his wife? Share your thoughts or the Fripp song that you will never forget below. If you enjoy reading about odd artists like these, don't forget to subscribe to our station. You won't believe how strange the next trip will be.